counteract any interference and touting paper ballots as an election security measure. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be with you.
All right, so you just heard the president say that certainly there was some Russian meddling, but there was also meddling, he said, by other countries, maybe other individuals in the 2016 presidential election. He didn't name anyone. He seems to be downplaying the Russian meddling. He says the administration is now working very hard to safeguard the upcoming midterm November elections, the 2020 presidential election. Were you at all encouraged by his comments today?
No, I'm not at all. Maybe he's referring to that 400-pound man lying in a bed someplace that meddled in the American election. No, it was Russia. Russia meddled in the 2016 election, and all of the intelligence agencies say they are now, at this moment and for the last several months, once again meddling in our election process. And when just 2 weeks ago, his key law enforcement and intelligence agencies were asked in a formal hearing whether they had any instructions from the president to protect this country's basic democracy, they all answered the same way. No, they've not received any instructions. Now, maybe the president has done something in the last couple of days, but he certainly hasn't announced it. And why he doesn't have the courage to stand up and tell Putin, get out or you're going to get in big, big trouble, I do not understand. Why he doesn't present that kind of necessary courage to protect the most fundamental part of this nation's democracy, our elections.
Well, what do you think the answer is? Why is he reluctant to do so?
Well, I think it goes back to the 2016 election, where we know that there was Russian meddling in the election in support of the Trump campaign. Leaving aside the question of whether there was collusion or not, we won't go there, but we do know that they meddled in the election in the support of Donald Trump. The indictment that Mueller brought forward of 13 Russians and 2 Russian corporations was detailed, excruciating, detailed, clear about what they were doing, how they were doing it, and who they were doing it for, Donald J. Trump.
We learned more about the Russia investigation, the special counsel's investigation, from Sam Nunberg, former campaign aide, a brief campaign aide for the Trump campaign. He shared his 2-page subpoena from the special counsel. What does it tell you about the direction that Robert Mueller is heading right now, looking at the names of all the individuals they want information about?
Well, it means that the Mueller investigation is going full throttle. It is moving along very, very quickly. There have been indictments. Multiple indictments have been brought forward. They're also moving closer and closer to the heart of that campaign. They're already there with Gates and with Manafort. But beyond that, how close to the White House will they get with regard to the campaign? And there's another whole track that's underway, and that is follow the money. What kind of nefarious financing schemes have been undertaken? Is there money laundering? Has there been undue influence? We know, my definition, Wolf, of corruption is when you use your political power for personal gain. Is there any doubt at all of what Kushner was doing when he was meeting in the White House and very shortly thereafter came back with 2 multi-hundred-million-dollar loans? Is there any doubt about what was going on in Qatar? I think that the answer is very clear. It is corruption of the worst kind. If that had taken place in an African country, we would be screaming about corruption. We talk about corruption in Russia. It's exactly the same thing that's happening here in America, and it's got to stop.
Republicans in the House, your colleagues, the Republican colleagues, they're hinting that their House Intelligence Committee investigation and some are suggesting that the Senate investigations could soon come to a conclusion. Should the American people trust their final reports?
No, not at all. And there's evidence for that. The Nunes memo, which was clearly biased, which was clearly incomplete, which clearly did not lay out all the facts, written by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee for the purposes of providing cover for Donald J. Trump and his crew. That's what was going on. Will they do better with Nunes in charge? Absolutely not. Don't count on it. Count on this. If they shut that down, the American people may very wind up without the full information that we need to protect our democracy in the future. We need that information. We need to write laws. We need to provide the money. And by the way, we did. Wolf, we provided $120 million to the State Department to push back on Russia, to protect our election. Zero, not one nickel of that money has been spent by this administration. It's one more example of the dereliction of fundamental responsibility that the administration has to protect America.
That $120 million was appropriated back in 2016, and you're right, none of it has yet been spent by the State Department. Who do you blame for that?
The President and Tillerson. Who else to blame? They're running this operation. Tillerson knew the money was there. If he didn't know the money was there, then that's a dereliction also. And by the way, Tillerson happened to be the best buddy of Putin. So he's Putin's buddy. What do you expect? He's going to use that money to push back on Putin? Hasn't happened. What's going on here? Why can't the president push back on Russia? Why can't the president protect America from Russia's meddling in our most fundamental process, our elections? Why can't Tillerson use the $120 million to protect our nation, to push back on Russia? I think the answer is we're going to find out if those investigations continue.
I want you to listen, Congressman, to the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, a former U.S. Senator, what he said earlier today about Jared Kushner's security clearance. Listen to this.
I don't believe it's a threat to our national security. No, I don't. Because he now has, under General Kelly's direction, had a temporary access to some types of information, but not to highly classified information.
You trust the DNI's judgment on this?
No, I don't. I know that the Trump campaign and the Trump administration throughout the 2016 campaign and up until this moment during this presidency wants to harp on Hillary's question about whether she properly cared for classified information. There was a legitimate question there, no doubt about it. But this administration had in the White House more than 100 people who could not pass the fundamental security requirements to get secret information, top secret information. That went on for a year. And we know that they have access. I spend a lot of time in classified hearings. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. And I know that that information is extraordinarily valuable for economic purposes. I know that if you know that the American government is doing this or the foreign governments are doing that, you can trade on that information. And I want to ask, did anybody trade on that information? Were there any whispers back and forth? What's going on here? What kind of information did Kushner have when he met with the Qataris? What happened? This is one of our allies, and suddenly this administration turned on them. Why? Because Kushner couldn't get a loan? What's going on here? All of these questions are out there, and it really bothers me that after 2.5 years of harping after Hillary Clinton's lapses in security, this administration has done it 1,000 times worse in the White House.
I will point out that the president specifically asked his son-in-law, senior advisor, Jared Kushner, to deal with Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, in addition to dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. That was one of his assignments as a senior advisor to the president, and he asked him to do so, but I understand your concern. Give me a final thought before I let you go.
It's a very real concern. He was asked to negotiate with Qatar. He was asked to negotiate with the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And he was also asking them for money. That's corruption. There's no other word for it. And it has to stop. This White House has to be cleaned up. And we need a president to protect this nation's most fundamental process, the process of our election. And if he won't do it, then he ought to get out of there. We need somebody in that position that's ready to protect America from what Russia considers to be an information war. A three-letter word, war.
John Garamendi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, Britain sends a very harsh, high-level warning to the Kremlin after a former Russian spy turned British agent is the victim of an apparent poisoning. And there's been a revolving door over at the White House, but President Trump says there's no chaos, there's no problem.
Can I read where, oh, gee, maybe